Pregame.com.
Hey everybody, welcome to Pregame TV. We're talking NBA on Thursday night. He's Brian Leonard, I'm Scott Spreitzer. We're going to break down the battle between the Celtics and the Chicago Bulls. And right now, of course, Derrick Rose listed as questionable. He's been out for most of the last couple of weeks for the Chicago Bulls. If he plays in this game, we project a line about 6.5, Brian, probably about 2 to 2.5 points lower if he's held out of this contest. We're talking about this game before Wednesday night's matchup between the Celtics and the Spurs, so that'll have to be factored in. And Ray Allen, going into the Wednesday night game at last check, was listed as probable for that contest. He's missed a couple of the games, so he'll have to factor that into the mix if he stays healthy on Wednesday night. But here's the first part of this handicap, Brian. Boston is so hell-bent on staying out of that 7-2 first-round playoff series, which would match them up in all likelihood against the Miami Heat, that they're really playing their tails off right now. We saw them go balls out, if you will, against the Miami Heat over the weekend and win the game by 19 points. They've had a nice little run against Miami at home in regular season action, but I don't think they want to see the Miami Heat in a 7-game series or a best-of-7 series to open things up. So we're going to get Boston at their very best, or at least trying to be at their very best for most of the rest of the regular season. Yeah,
they've won some of the last 8. The only loss was to Philadelphia. I think they have matchup problems with the Sixers. They played them twice this year, lost those games by 13 and 32. But you're right, and that's something for a lot of people to keep in mind as the season progresses. It may not be beneficial for some of these teams to actually win some of these games, depending on the teams they match up against. And it's definitely a situation where Boston doesn't want to be in that grouping. They have lost 2 or 3 this year to the Bulls, and that included a 9-point loss here as a 7.5-point dog last time they were here. And I've been really impressed by Boston's defense. And I knew coming into the season that would be the strength of the Boston team. As of late, the last 9 opponents have held them to double digits, which is something that I think plays pretty well in this game, because Chicago, you take a look at their offense, and if you throw out the overtime game that they had, they've been held to double digits 10 straight games. So Chicago right now, without Derrick Rose in the lineup, having a real problem scoring, and now they're going against a team playing great defense.
Sure, and exactly, and that's the thing about Boston is Doc Rivers is going to expect the highest level of intensity no matter who's on the court for the Boston Celtics at the time, and that's why they have been such a good defensive team efficiency-wise over the past 4 or 5 years since the three amigos came together and really playing well, as you mentioned right now. You know, I remember the season after they won the championship, and I remember them, it was probably about a month before the midpoint, before the All-Star break, and this is what I like about Doc Rivers and Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen and Paul Pierce, is he sat them down in his office, if you remember, and he said to them in, let's say, late December, it looks pretty good chance we're going to make the postseason. Here's what I want you guys to buy into. Less playing time for the big three over the next 6 to 8 weeks so you stay healthy and fresh. And also, we're not going to practice in between games. We're just going to stop. It's going to be walkthroughs until we get to the final couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks of the regular season. We don't care so much about home court. We just care about getting to the playoffs and being healthy for the playoffs, and then we'll see how things go. Well, they almost won a championship back-to-back, and if you remember, if it wasn't for Perkins getting injured in the championship series, they may have very well won their second championship with the big three on the team. So what I like about this team is they're very open to what Doc Rivers wants to do, and that's why I think you're going to see intense defensive efforts throughout this rest of the regular season, or until they're either assured of not being in that 7 spot, or they are definitely locked into that 7 spot either way. But, you know, both teams have been under machines over the last 9 or 10 games for each team. You mentioned their 3 meetings this year. You had 177 points scored, 170, or total, I should say, posted, 173 posted in another game, 179 in a third game. The only over came in that 95-91 Boston win. But the last time on this floor, there were 169 points scored between the two teams.
Yeah, you made some great points about coaching and how that handle it the rest of the season. I mean, Popovich for San Antonio has done that all year long, which makes San Antonio so dangerous come the end of the season. And for a lot of these guys, you know, we always talk about must-win games. It comes up more often in the NFL because you've got such a shortened season. But keep in mind that a lot of these veteran teams, you know, your teams like the Miami Heat with their key players that have injury problems in the past, your San Antonios, Chicago's with Derrick Rose this year, and Boston, these are teams that once they get to the playoffs, it's a totally different ballgame. So just because they need to play to get home field advantage or get the edge over, like right now Oklahoma City is really fighting it out with Chicago for the best record. I don't think Chicago really cares, and the way they played last night, It looked like they didn't care. But it's a situation where just because a team is in a must-win situation, they don't need to must-win because they've got enough confidence they can win on the road in the playoffs.
And Chicago and Miami might not care a whole lot who they're playing in the first round of the playoffs, but nobody else, I think, wants to play the Boston Celtics because of the veteran leadership,
Correct.
because of that coaching staff. So, but anyway, bottom line is, who do you like in this particular
I like the under. You made great points on the under. My stats say to play the under. The way these defenses are playing right now, and I'm not a big believer in the Boston offense. And with Derrick Rose, even if he does come back, I mean, we've seen when star players come back, it takes time for them to get playing to their ability. I like the under here. I think this is a good play.
He's Brian Leonard. He's on the under in Thursday night's game between Boston and Chicago. Hey, watch me and Brian all week long. We've got a National League and American League previews for the baseball season, which really gets underway Wednesday and Thursday, although there were a couple of games played last week in Japan. We've also got Friday night NBA we're going to talk about. Check that out. That's the battle between Oklahoma City, and I'm going to look at my notes. I forgot they're playing for a second, the Indiana Pacers. We'll talk about that with Friday right here on Pregame TV.
Pregame.com